Welcome to Time Before Us, the channel where ancient history breathes again. Before time had a name. Before the first human breath, there existed a world fierce, forgotten, and alive. Creatures of scale and silence, predators wrapped in feathers, titans that shook the earth, lives erased, bones buried beneath eternity. But they are not lost. They are waiting. This is Time Before Us, where prehistory worlds rise again, and the stories buried in stone finally speak. Chapter 1. Oceanic Giants. The ocean has always been a place of mystery, vast and unknowable. Even today, its deepest trenches conceal creatures we have yet to see, forms of life that remind us how little we truly understand of our own planet. But if the modern ocean feels mysterious, then the seas of the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs, were something else entirely. They were worlds within worlds, teeming with creatures so immense, so alien, and so beautifully adapted to their environments that they blur the line between nightmare and dream. Close your eyes for a moment and drift with me back in time. Imagine you are suspended in cool, blue water. Sunlight pours down through the surface above, slicing into the depths in pale, golden beams. All around you, the ocean hums with life. Small fish dart like flashes of silver, ancient corals sway gently, and vast schools of ammonites spiral in mesmerizing patterns. Then, from the gloom below, a shadow begins to rise. At first, it seems like a trick of the light, a dark blur against the pale shimmer of the sea. But as it grows closer, details sharpen. You see the sleek, streamlined body, the long, narrow jaws bristling with teeth, and the great eyes that gleam like glass orbs in the fading light. This is not a fish, nor a whale, nor anything that exists in our world today. This is an ichthyosaur, one of the true masters of the Mesozoic ocean. Ichthyosaurs looked like dolphins at first glance, but their resemblance was purely coincidental. A case of nature finding the same solution to the same problem across millions of years. Their bodies were built for speed, their flippers curved for precision steering, and their tails perfectly shaped for powerful thrusts through the water. Some species were small, no larger than a human, while others grew longer than a bus, their jaws filled with sharp teeth for catching slippery prey. For nearly 150 million years, ichthyosaurs thrived, hunting in packs or alone, chasing down fish, squid, and other marine reptiles. They surfaced to breathe air, just like whales do today, and some species gave birth to live young in the open ocean. Tiny ichthyosaurs, born into a world of predators and endless blue. Fossils even show mothers caught in the act of giving birth, their little ones forever frozen in stone as proof of their oceanic lives. But ichthyosaurs were only the beginning. Deeper still, lurking in the colder, darker waters, swam the plesiosaurs. If the ichthyosaurs were sleek hunters built for speed, the plesiosaurs were enigmas, creatures that seemed stitched together from different blueprints. Their long necks stretched like serpents, tipped with small heads filled with needle-like teeth, perfect for snapping up fish. Some species had necks longer than a giraffe, each vertebra locked together in a flexible chain that allowed them to coil and twist with eerie precision. Others, the pliosaurs, abandoned the long necks altogether, becoming broad-headed giants with massive jaws strong enough to crush bone. These were the apex predators of their age, hunting not only fish but also other marine reptiles. Some pliosaurs grew over 40 feet long, their skulls alone larger than the height of a man. Fossils of prey species show puncture marks from their teeth, evidence of a brutal and efficient reign at the top of the food chain. Imagine one now, a Liopleurodon gliding through the murky water. Its body moves with the steady grace of something that knows no fear. Its massive flippers carve the water silently, propelling it with power that dwarfs anything around it. Smaller creatures scatter at its approach, darting into the shadows, knowing that to linger is to vanish in a single snap of its enormous jaws. To encounter such a creature in its world would be like standing before a storm inevitable, unstoppable, and magnificent. Yet not every marine reptile was a swift predator. Some, like the placoderms, lived close to the seafloor, their heavy, armored bodies weighing them down as they crushed shellfish with blunt, grinding teeth. Their bodies were protected by thick plates of bone, almost like a turtle, but they were distant relatives, evolving their own path toward survival. They moved slowly, but their strength and armor gave them an advantage in a world where speed was not always the key to life. And then there were the mosasaurs. They came later, toward the end of the Cretaceous, but their rise was meteoric. Descended from land-dwelling lizards, mosasaurs returned to the sea and became some of the most ferocious predators the ocean has ever seen. Picture a creature with the body of a crocodile stretched to enormous lengths, with limbs transformed into powerful flippers and jaws filled with recurved teeth perfect for gripping slippery prey. Some species stretched nearly 60 feet long. Rivaling today's largest whales in sheer size, mosasaurs were the undisputed rulers of their oceans, hunting everything from fish to birds to other marine reptiles. Fossils show that they even cannibalized their own kind, devouring smaller mosasaurs in desperate acts of survival or dominance. Unlike ichthyosaurs or plesiosaurs, whose reign stretched across many millions of years, the mosasaurs rose quickly and fell just as suddenly, wiped out along with the dinosaurs when the asteroid struck 66 million years ago. The seas were never empty, though. Even as giants ruled above, the depths teemed with countless smaller lives. Ammonites, with their spiral shells, filled the oceans in such abundance that their fossils are found on nearly every continent today. They ranged from tiny coin-sized spirals to massive shells as large as a car tire, their tentacles reaching from their shells like squid. They were the eternal prey, hunted by ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs alike. Yet their sheer numbers ensured their survival for millions of years, until the great extinction claimed them. Now imagine this oceanic scene unfolding. In front of you, an ichthyosaur darts past in pursuit of a fish, its body a flash of silver blue in the dim light. Nearby, a long-necked plesiosaur coils through the water, weaving its neck among schools of darting prey. From the depths below, a pliosaur rises, jaws gaping, scattering everything in its path as it lunges. Above them, sunlight filters in shifting beams, illuminating a slow drift of ammonites spinning in lazy spirals. For a moment, the ocean feels alive, endless, and eternal. The truth, though, is that these oceans were just as fragile as ours today. Entire groups of marine reptiles rose to dominance, only to vanish when the balance shifted. Climate changes, volcanic activity, shifting continents, and sudden catastrophes all played a role. The ichthyosaurs that once dominated vanished long before the asteroid impact, their reign quietly ending as oceans changed. The ammonites, once so abundant, disappeared in the final mass extinction. And the mighty mosasaurs, lords of the Cretaceous seas, were gone in a geological instant, but their echoes remain. Their bones, buried in stone, whisper their stories to us across millions of years. When paleontologists uncover the skeleton of an ichthyosaur in a windswept cliff, or a pliosaur skull embedded in rock, or the coiled spiral of an ammonite shell, they are not just finding fossils. They are uncovering the remains of entire worlds, oceans that no longer exist, creatures that once breathed, swam, hunted, and thrived in the very places we walk today. And tonight, as you drift into calmness, imagine yourself floating once more in that ancient sea. The light above is fading, the water cool and steady around you. Somewhere in the gloom, the sleek form of an ichthyosaur glides past. A plesiosaur twists its long neck toward the surface, and far off in the shadows, a mosasaur prowls, silent and unseen. The ocean is alive, vast, and eternal. And in this ancient dream, you are part of it. Chapter 2. The forest of giants. The forest floor is quiet, but not still. A thin mist drapes over the ancient undergrowth, softening the beams of sunlight that fight their way through the canopy above. Enormous ferns sway gently in the damp breeze, and the buzzing of insects creates a constant background hum. The air smells heavy with resin, damp bark, and the earthy weight of millions of years of life compacted into soil. Yet, even here, silence is a lie. The giants are near. Imagine standing at the base of a tree so tall, its crown is lost in the haze above. Now place beside it a creature equally vast, a dinosaur whose long neck sways like a living tower among the trunks. This is the forest of giants, a world ruled not by predators, but by herbivores so massive they transformed their environment simply by existing. These were the sauropods, the largest land animals Earth has ever known. Creatures like Brachiosaurus, with its front legs taller than most predators could leap, or Diplodocus, whose whip-like tail stretched nearly the length of a subway train. Each step shook the forest floor, and each feeding session reshaped entire ecosystems. But life among the giants was not just about size. It was about survival. Think about the challenge. You weigh over 50 tons. Your heart must pump blood, the height of a 5-story building, to reach your brain. And every single day you need to eat hundreds of pounds of vegetation. Where do you find enough food? How do you keep from overheating? How do you even move through a forest dense with trees without becoming trapped by your own bulk? The answer lies in adaptation, in evolutionary tricks that let these colossal animals thrive where others would collapse. The forest itself bent to their presence. In some places, paleontologists believe sauropods created grazing trails simply by moving together in herds, flattening trees and clearing vegetation. Their feeding range was immense, from ground level shrubs to treetop leaves others could never reach. It was as if they were living construction machines, reshaping the landscape daily. And yet, with great size came great vulnerability. A herd of sauropods may have seemed untouchable, but predators always lurked. Imagine the scene. A group of Allosaurus stalking the shadows, eyes fixed on a calf straying too close to the edge of the herd. The adults, towering and strong, may not have been quick to act, but their sheer bulk was defense enough. One swing of a tail could crush a predator's ribs. One step could end a hunt before it began. Still, the forest was not ruled by size alone. Smaller dinosaurs thrived in the shade of the giants. Ornithopods scurried to snatch low plants overlooked by their towering neighbors. Early mammals darted between roots, feeding on seeds and insects in the safety of shadows. Pterosaurs swooped overhead, gliding from one sunlit clearing to the next. The giants provided not only food competition, but also shelter. Their presence shaped who lived and who perished. And then there's the sound. Close your eyes and listen. Deep, rumbling calls rolling through the trees like distant thunder. Scientists believe sauropods may have communicated through low-frequency sounds, vibrations that could travel for miles through the forest floor. These weren't delicate chirps or roars, but seismic notes, the language of titans. But perhaps the most astonishing part of life in the forest of giants is how such massive animals even existed at all. Evolution favored extremes here. Their long necks weren't just for reaching leaves. They were tools of efficiency, allowing them to stand still while sweeping wide arcs of vegetation into their mouths, without moving their colossal bodies. Their skeletons were miracles of engineering, hollow bones reinforced like bridges, strong yet light enough to carry unimaginable size. And what of their hearts? A Brachiosaurus heart would have had to pump with unimaginable force to send blood to a brain, perched nearly 30 feet above the ground. Some scientists wonder if they had specialized valves, or even multiple hearts, along the neck to assist in circulation. We may never know the full truth, but the very fact these animals lived proves nature solved problems no engineer has yet mastered. The forest itself witnessed cycles of growth and destruction. Fires, ignited by lightning, occasionally swept through, leaving charred trunks and open clearings. But within years, the giants returned, feeding on the new bursts of plant life. The relationship between dinosaurs and their forests was symbiotic. The giants spread seeds through dung, carried spores across miles, and fertilized the ground with every passing. Without them, the forests may have looked very different indeed. Now picture nightfall. The forest changes. The booming calls fade into silence, replaced by the whisper of insects and the distant splash of a stream. The giants settle, their massive bodies rising and falling with slow, thunderous breaths. Around them, the forest awakens in other ways. Nocturnal hunters, smaller but fierce, creep through the ferns. Early mammals emerge, foraging under the cover of darkness. Above, the canopy reveals flashes of starlight, light that has seen the rise and fall of countless species. It is humbling, isn't it? To realize that in this world of unfathomable size, every creature had a place. From the towering sauropod to the insect hidden beneath a fallen leaf, life thrived in balance. The giants ruled not by crushing opposition, but by coexisting with the countless forms that made their forest hold. In the end, the forest of giants was not just a place of size, but of scale. Everything here, from the heartbeat of a titanic herbivore to the rustle of a mammal in the roots, existed within a system both fragile and enduring. And while the giants themselves are long gone, their echoes remain in the fossilized trunks, in the footprints stamped deep into ancient mud, and in the bones that remind us life once dared to grow so large it nearly touched the sky. Chapter 3. The Sky Ruler. The forest fades away. Shadows of trees grow smaller, vanishing beneath us. The earth, once the stage of titanic herbivores and relentless hunters, becomes a patchwork of greens, browns, and rivers that glitter like silver veins. We are rising now, lifted into a world most dinosaurs never touched. Above the canopy, beyond the reach of predators, a new kingdom begins. This is the domain of the Sky Ruler. Stretching its wings against the endless blue, the pterosaur soars with ease, a master of the air in an age dominated by giants of land and sea. Imagine an animal with wings longer than a fighter jet, its body balanced by hollow bones and muscles designed not for brute force, but for lift and glide. This was Quetzalcoatlus, one of the largest creatures ever to take flight, and a living reminder that dominance does not always walk on land. Sometimes it flies. Up close, the Sky Ruler is both alien and familiar. Its wings are not feathered like a bird's, but stretched membranes of skin and muscle, pulled taut over an elongated fourth finger. Each flap carries power, but it's true. Mastery lies in gliding. Like modern condors, Quetzalcoatlus could ride thermal currents, traveling vast distances without tiring. High above rivers and plains, it scanned the ground with a sharp gaze, searching for opportunity. But what did it eat? For decades, paleontologists debated whether such giants were hunters of fish, like oversized seabirds, or scavengers of land, feasting on carcasses left behind by predators. Some suggest it stalked prey like a stork, striding across floodplains, with its long neck darting down to snatch small dinosaurs, reptiles, or anything it could swallow whole. Others believe it ruled the skies as a nomadic scavenger, using its height to spot death below. Whatever the case, the Sky Ruler had options, and in the harsh landscapes of the Cretaceous, versatility meant survival. Now imagine its launch. How does an animal weighing as much as a small car take off into the air? The answer lies in its design. Unlike birds, which rely on two legs for takeoff, Quetzalcoatlus used all four. It vaulted skyward like a giant bat, powerful arms thrusting it into the air before its wings caught the wind. Within moments, it was airborne, riding the invisible highways of the sky. This was not clumsy flight. It was grace at its most colossal. Below, the world continued unaware. Herds of hadrosaurs grazed along riverbanks, their heads occasionally lifting to glance at the shadow above. Smaller predators lingered in the brush, careful not to draw attention. But overhead, the sky ruler was untouchable. No predator could match its reach, no force could contain it, no sea could trap it. It was not bound by the earth. Even in death, the sky ruler left its mark. Its bones, fragile yet immense, fossilized only under rare circumstances. Each discovery is a puzzle, fragile as glass yet monumental in meaning. To hold a fragment of its wing is to touch the edge of a world where the sky itself was alive with giants. But flight is not just movement, it is freedom. Think of what the world looked like from above, the slow crawl of sauropods moving through forests, the shimmer of sunlight on Cretaceous seas, the distant thunder of volcanoes painting the horizon with ash. From the air, the earth was both vast and fragile, a living canvas beneath the wings of a ruler who never built kingdoms, never waged wars, but claimed dominance simply by soaring higher than any creature dared. Night comes to the skies. The winds cool, and the golden glow of sunset bleeds into the purple of ancient twilight. The sky ruler folds its wings and drifts downward, landing with surprising grace. It towers like a living pillar, head scanning the darkness, wings tucked but ready. Around it, the night chorus begins, the hiss of insects, the low calls of distant predators, the heartbeat of a world in motion. And yet, in that moment, the sky ruler waits. Tomorrow it will rise again, ruling not through strength or ferocity, but through command of the skies themselves. For in a world where land and sea belong to monsters, the heavens were owned by a different kind of king, the sky ruler. Chapter 4. Echoes of the hunt night has fallen on the prehistoric world. The air is thick with silence, broken only by the occasional call of an insect or the rustle of leaves shifting in the cool breeze. But silence, in these ancient lands, is never safety. For in the darkness, hunters stir. Their shadows stretch across the earth, their movements calculated, precise, and eerily quiet. The dinosaurs most people imagine are lumbering giants or thunderous predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex charging in broad daylight. But the real story of dinosaur hunting is far more complex and far more fascinating. Hunting was not just about brute strength. It was about patience, teamwork, stealth, and sometimes even intelligence that mirrored the strategies of modern predators today. Imagine the sound of branches snapping underfoot, but only once. A pause, another footstep. Something out there is tracking, closing the distance. If you had lived in the Cretaceous forest, you wouldn't have just feared what you saw, you'd have feared what you could not. The echoes of the hunt begin here. The hunt was as old as life itself, but among dinosaurs, it reached a scale that reshaped ecosystems. Packs of raptors, smaller but lightning fast, relied not on size but on precision. These weren't movie monsters. They were real feathered, warm-blooded hunters working in unison to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Some paleontologists believe species like Deinonychus hunted in coordinated groups circling, distracting, and exhausting their victims until one fatal strike ended it. Think of wolves on the snowy plains today, or lions stalking in the savannah. The difference? Raptors hunted creatures armored like tanks or towering giants many times their size. It was risk, calculated at every turn, with survival balancing on the knife's edge. But not all hunting was a pack affair. Some dinosaurs were ambush specialists, lying in wait for the perfect moment. Picture a thick, fern-filled marsh. The undergrowth trembles just slightly, but the prey notices nothing. Suddenly, a predator bursts from cover with explosive speed, jaws snapping shut before the victim even realizes what's happened. Dinosaurs like Majungasaurus stocki, brutal hunters from Madagascar, may have relied on this very tactic, their compact bodies perfect for short, violent bursts of power. And then there were the giants, the apex predators that ruled entire regions through raw dominance. Tyrannosaurus rex, Giganotosaurus, Spinosaurus. Each had their own hunting style. T. Rex, contrary to outdated beliefs of it being just a scavenger, was built for power. Its eyes faced forward, giving it depth perception perfect for tracking prey. Its bite force was unmatched, able to crush bone with a single snap. This wasn't a predator that needed stealth. Its very presence was terror. Still, even the mightiest hunters had to calculate every move. Hunting was costly. One wrong step could mean a broken bone, a failed chase, or starvation. That's why many predators, much like modern lions or crocodiles, often turn to scavenging when the opportunity arose. If a carcass was available, why waste energy chasing something that could fight back? The echoes of the hunt included not just stalking and killing, but seizing the right moment, however it came. But let's pause here and ask, did dinosaurs hunt in total silence? Or was the prehistoric night filled with sounds we can only imagine? Scientists believe some theropods may have used calls to communicate during hunts, short bursts of sound, like birds or mammals today. A low growl in the dark to signal movement. A sharp screech to drive prey into an ambush. We'll never know exactly what these sounded like, but fossils of vocal structures in certain dinosaurs suggest that their voices were far from silent. The forest at night may have been alive with eerie, bone-chilling cries echoing through the dark, and not all hunters had teeth and claws. Some of the most fascinating strategies came from the skies. Early pterosaurs and bird-like dinosaurs used the night skies to their advantage, swooping down when prey least expected it. Think of owls today, hunting silently under the cover of moonlight. Evolution has a way of repeating its best tricks. The echoes of the hunt were not only about the predators themselves, but about the prey. Herbivores evolved their own defenses: armor, horns, herds, and speed. The hadrosaurs, for example, weren't just mindless plant eaters. They lived in massive groups, where eyes and ears were everywhere. One startled member could send the entire herd into a stampede, crushing or confusing the predators. Ankylosaurs, with their clubs and plates, were living fortresses, making any attack a gamble. Hunting them wasn't just dangerous, it was a game of survival for the predator too. And yet, the hunt shaped the world. It kept populations balanced, pushed evolution forward, and carved the rhythm of life into every corner of the Mesozoic. Predators and prey were locked in an eternal dance, each adaptation in one sparking new defenses in the other. The question is, what echoes of those ancient hunts remain with us today? Look at the way birds of prey swoop silently through the air, the way wolves coordinate, or the patience of a crocodile waiting motionless in the water. These are not just coincidences. They are living reminders, echoes of strategies perfected millions of years ago. So, when we imagine dinosaurs, we shouldn't only think of them as mindless beasts. They were strategists, risk-takers, survivors. Their hunts were filled with cunning, calculation, and sometimes even cooperation. The forest, the swamp, the open plains all carried the echoes of the hunt. And if you close your eyes, you might still hear them: the low growl, the rush of footsteps, the sudden silence before the strike. Because in a world ruled by dinosaurs, the greatest sound of all was the one you didn't hear: the sound of a predator closing in. Chapter 5. Songs of Survival. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing in a prehistoric forest. Sunlight filters through giant ferns and towering conifers, casting long shadows across the damp ground. You hear the crunch of leaves as a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs grazes nearby. At first, it seems silent, but listen closely. Beneath the rustling trees and distant river, another sound begins to emerge. Low, vibrating calls, subtle grunts, and the occasional trumpeting bellow that rolls through the air like thunder. These were not random noises. They were messages, warnings, greetings, and even lullabies to soothe the young. For decades, dinosaurs were portrayed as mute giants. The image was one of silent beasts, clashing in violence, their world filled only with roars invented by Hollywood sound engineers. But science has painted a far more complex picture. Dinosaurs were not voiceless. They lived in societies, and their survival depended on communication. And those songs, whether carried by voice, by movement, or even by color, were the threads that tied family, herd, and species together. Think of the hadrosaurs, often called the cows of the Cretaceous. Their fossilized skulls contain elaborate crests, hollow tubes that extended above their heads. For years, these structures puzzled paleontologists. Were they ornaments, weapons, air conditioning systems? Then, by reconstructing their internal anatomy, scientists realized those tubes could act like wind instruments, amplifying and resonating. Sound. A hadrosaur's call may have echoed for miles across a plain, like the horn of a ship cutting through fog. Imagine a herd moving across the floodplains, their deep, vibrating notes rolling together, a wall of sound keeping the group united. These were the prehistoric songs of survival. And it wasn't just hadrosaurs. Ceratopsians, the famous horned dinosaurs like Triceratops, also likely communicated through sound and gesture. Their massive frills may not have been just for defense or display, but for broadcasting signals. Picture two rival males not charging immediately into a bloody clash, but standing off, bellowing and displaying, the frill flushed with color, their calls reverberating, each trying to intimidate the other without spilling blood. In many ways, their communication was as much about avoiding conflict as it was about initiating it. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, give us some of the strongest clues. Songbirds today fill forests with complex calls, and even non-songbirds use communication constantly, from geese honking to gulls crying. Crocodiles, dinosaurs' closest living relatives outside birds, rumble with infrasonic calls that travel, not just through air, but through water and ground. Put those clues together, and a pattern emerges. Dinosaurs almost certainly spoke in a variety of tones, pitches, and even vibrations that humans might not fully perceive. But not all communication was vocal. In fact, some of the most critical exchanges may have been silent. A mother Maiasaura, whose name means good mother lizard, may have comforted her young not only with low rumbles, but with touches, nuzzles, and movements. Fossil evidence of nesting sites shows that these dinosaurs cared for their young long after hatching. That level of parental investment almost demands a system of signals, from soft calls to subtle gestures, much like elephants today guide their calves with gentle nudges and low rumbles. And then there were the predators. Imagine a pack of raptors hunting together in a dense forest. They couldn't simply roar and charge, noise would warn their prey. Instead, they likely relied on a combination of body language and sharp, minimal sounds. A raised tail, a head tilt, a chirping click. Small signals that meant circle left or wait. This kind of coordinated behavior is seen today in wolves, lions, even corvids like crows. So why not in their ancient cousins? The prehistoric soundscape, then, wasn't silence. It was alive with layers of meaning. Booming calls across open plains, low-frequency vibrations felt in the chest, the clatter of claws on stone signaling movement, the crack of vegetation underfoot, marking direction. Communication meant survival, because in a world of giant predators, unpredictable climates, and constant change, no dinosaur could afford to be alone. Chapter 5. Songs of Survival. Closure eyes and step into the deep past, into a world where the ground trembles with the footsteps of giants. The air is heavy with the scent of ancient ferns and conifers, and the light that filters through. The canopy paints shifting patterns across the damp forest floor. In the distance, a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs grazes lazily, their bodies swaying in unison as they strip leaves from branches. At first the scene seems strangely silent. But wait, listen closely. Beneath the rustling of leaves and the soft trickle of water, another sound emerges, A deep, vibrating hum, followed by a sharp, trumpet-like call that rolls like thunder through the forest. Another answers, lower, longer. Soon the air is alive. With calls, grunts, and booming echoes, this was no silence. This was communication, the lifeline that bound dinosaurs to one another. The subtle songs of survival that allowed them not only to live, but to thrive for more than 160 million years. For most of the 20th century, dinosaurs were thought of as mute. Museums displayed them as cold-blooded, lumbering beasts, their lives painted in silence, broken only by the crunch of teeth on flesh. Even the most famous dinosaur sound we know today, the roar of a Tyrannosaurus rex in movies, was a human invention, stitched together from recordings of lions, elephants, and even alligators. But science has revealed a very different truth. Dinosaurs were not mute monsters. They were social creatures, capable of complex communication. Their calls were not simply noise. They were the threads of survival, binding families, guiding herds, and keeping species alive in a dangerous world. The evidence begins with the hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs. Among the most common plant eaters of the late Cretaceous, their skulls were crowned with elaborate hollow crests, tubes and chambers connected to their nasal passages. At first, paleontologists puzzled over these strange structures. Were they for display, weapons, air cooling systems? But when scientists reconstructed their internal anatomy and ran simulations, the answer became clear. These crests were resonating chambers. Blow air through them, and they would turn the dinosaur's voice into a booming, echoing call that could carry for miles. In essence, hadrosaurs walked with built-in musical instruments on their heads. Each species had a differently shaped crest, suggesting that each one produced a unique sound. Like different instruments in an orchestra. Picture it. A herd of Parasaurolophus moving across a floodplain at dawn. Their necks dip as they graze, tails swaying. Then one lifts its head, the crest catching the morning light, and releases a deep, haunting call. The sound vibrates in your chest as much as your ears, a low-frequency note that rolls across the land like a foghorn. Others reply, creating a chorus of resonating voices. This wasn't random. It was coordination, a way to keep the herd together across long distances, to warn of predators lurking at the edges, or to call to a mate with a sound that echoed like no other. For hadrosaurs, sound was not just communication. It was survival, but the songs of survival were not limited to the duckbills. Ceratopsians, horned dinosaurs like Triceratops, also likely had their own vocabulary of sound and gesture. Their massive skulls and frills were not just shields against predators, but also billboards for display and perhaps amplifiers for sound. Imagine two rival Triceratops males facing off on a plain. Instead of charging immediately, they lower their heads, bellow, and clash their horns lightly, testing each other. Their frills may have flushed with bright colors, signals of strength or aggression. These displays could have allowed rivals to size each other up without risking life-threatening injuries. In that sense, communication wasn't just about survival against predators. It was also about survival against one another, finding ways to avoid unnecessary battles that could leave both parties weakened in a world where weakness was fatal. If hadrosaurs and ceratopsians had booming calls, predators likely had subtler signals. Raptors, small feathered hunters like Velociraptor or Deinonychus, may have communicated the way wolves do today. Hunting in packs required coordination, but in silence. Too much noise would alert prey. So instead, they may have used gestures, tail flicks, and short chirp clicks. A raised claw might signal a flank attack. A sharp hiss might mean wait. These were not grand songs but whispered commands in the symphony of survival. Fossil evidence even hints that some raptors hunted in coordinated groups, much like modern birds of prey such as Harris's hawks. If that is true, their communication must have been sophisticated, enabling them to strike together with deadly efficiency. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, offer more clues. Today, birds fill forests with an incredible diversity of songs. Some are complex, like nightingales or mockingbirds, while others are simple but vital, like the alarm calls of geese or the low coos of doves. Even crocodiles, dinosaurs' closest living relatives outside of birds, produce deep, infrasonic rumbles that can be felt through water and ground. Put these clues together, and it becomes almost certain that dinosaurs used a wide range of sounds, from deep, chest-rattling rumbles to sharp cries, from low-frequency vibrations inaudible to us to bright, echoing trumpets that could fill an ancient valley. And then there were the parents. Some of the most powerful songs of survival may have been those exchanged between adults and their young. The fossil record shows us that species like Maiasaura, whose very name means good mother lizard, cared for their young long after hatching. Fossil nesting grounds contain evidence of parents bringing food to their babies, protecting them, and keeping them safe. That level of parental care would have been impossible without communication. Imagine a mother Maiasaura returning to a crowded nesting colony filled with hundreds of hatchlings. How would she find her own young? Likely through sound. Modern penguins do exactly this, locating their chicks in massive colonies by recognizing their unique calls. Dinosaurs may have done the same. Each baby's squeak or peep may have been slightly different, allowing parents and offspring to reunite in the chaos. Survival also depended on alarm calls. Picture a herd of Edmontosaurus quietly grazing on a plain when a shadow passes overhead, the silhouette of a large predator like a Tyrannosaurus. Instantly, one lets out a sharp, piercing call. The herd reacts in unison, heads up, bodies tense, some breaking into a run. Just as birds and antelope use alarm calls today to warn one another, dinosaurs almost certainly had their own vocabulary of danger. A short, sharp call might mean raptor in the grass, while a deep rumble might mean giant predator incoming. Communication, in this sense, was a shared defense system, giving the herd a better chance of survival than any individual alone. But not all songs were warnings. Some were invitations. During mating season, the prehistoric soundscape would have erupted in a cacophony of calls, trumpets, and displays. Male dinosaurs may have competed not just with horns and frills, but with their voices. Hadrosaurs with larger crests might have produced deeper, more resonant calls, signals of size and strength. Ceratopsians may have combined their bellows with visual displays, their frills brightening with blood flow to impress potential mates. Even the mighty Tyrannosaurus may have used low, booming sounds to attract partners, calls that rolled across the land like distant thunder. And then there is the possibility that some dinosaurs communicated in ways we can barely imagine. Low frequency. Infrasound like that used by elephants today travels across vast distances and even through the ground itself. Fossil evidence suggests that large sauropods, the long-necked giants, may have been capable of producing such sounds. Imagine a herd of Argentinosaurus, each the length of 4 buses spread across a plain. One lifts its head and releases a deep rumble so low it is more felt than heard. Miles away, another answers. These vibrations ripple through the earth, allowing the herd to stay connected even when scattered across miles of terrain. For giants like these, communication may have literally shaken the ground. In every corner of the prehistoric world, from the forests of the Jurassic to the floodplains of the Cretaceous, dinosaurs were singing their songs of survival. Some were booming horns that echoed across valleys. Others were whispered signals exchanged in the shadow of ferns. Some were lullabies between mother and child. Others were alarms that saved entire herds. They did not roar like Hollywood monsters. They spoke, they sang, they signaled. Their survival depended on it. So the next time you imagine the world of dinosaurs, don't picture a silent wasteland broken only by violence. Picture a soundscape as alive and complex as any modern jungle. Hear the booming calls of hadrosaurs echoing like foghorns across the plains. Hear the bellowing challenges of triceratops males, frills flashing in the sun. Hear the whispering chirps of raptors hunting in the shadows, the soft peeps of hatchlings waiting for their mother, the ground-shaking rumble of sauropods calling across the horizon. These were the voices of survival, the songs that bound them together, and the reason dinosaurs thrived for so long. Their world was not silent. It was alive with music, the music of survival. Chapter 6. Desert Breathes. The desert. It has always been a place of silence, of survival, of extremes. Today, we think of dunes rolling endlessly under a scorching sun, where only the toughest creatures can endure. But in the age of the dinosaurs, deserts were not lifeless wastelands. They were living worlds, harsh yet full of adaptation, where reptiles, mammals, and plants found ingenious ways to survive. When the desert breathed, life did not vanish, it transformed. Picture this: 100 million years ago, the winds sweep across an ancient desert that stretched across what is now northern Africa. The sand hisses like a restless ocean. Temperatures soar by day and plunge by night. Yet in this unforgiving realm, dinosaurs roamed. Not the towering giants of lush forests or the marine rulers of coastal seas, but smaller, tougher survivors, built for scarcity and heat. Among them was Tyrannosaurus, a sail-backed herbivore that looked like a cross between a hadrosaur and Spinosaurus. Unlike the colossal sauropods of wetter lands, Tyrannosaurus may have used its backsail to regulate heat-absorbing warmth in cool mornings, shedding excess in sweltering afternoons. Its wide feet spread against shifting sand, preventing it from sinking into dunes. This wasn't a creature of abundance. It was a creature of balance, managing energy, conserving water, grazing carefully on desert plants that themselves fought for every drop of moisture. But deserts weren't just about herbivores. Predators thrived here too. Deltadromus, long-legged and agile, dashed across sandy expanses like a greyhound of the Cretaceous. In a land where prey was scarce, speed and efficiency were everything. A single failed hunt could mean death, not just from hunger, but from exhaustion under the sun. These hunters knew how to strike fast, avoid waste, and take their opportunities when they came. And then there was Spinosaurus, whose story is tied as much to rivers and deltas as to deserts. Fossils of this semi-aquatic giant lie embedded in rocks that were once deserts punctuated by waterways. When droughts came, rivers shrank, and Spinosaurus may have found itself marooned in shallow streams, competing desperately for food. For an apex predator, the desert was both kingdom and prison, testing its dominance when water was scarce. But perhaps the most fascinating desert survivors were the small ones. Tiny burrowing mammals, insect-like reptiles, and lizards darted between rocks and burrows, hiding from the sun's fury. Even some dinosaurs, like the little feathered Nquebesaurus of South Africa's drylands, may have evolved with lightweight builds to cover ground quickly and survive in patchy environments. Life at small scale often had the greatest resilience. Desert also shaped the plants. Ancient conifers stood like defiant guardians, storing water deep in their roots. Ferns and cycads adapted by growing in bursts after rare rains, carpeting the desert floor for only weeks before vanishing back into seeds and spores. Dinosaurs knew these cycles intimately. Herds likely followed the rain, marching across impossible distances just to reach the next patch of greenery. In a sense, the desert forced movement. It created nomads of giants. Imagine herds of iguanodonts moving across dunes in silence, the sound of wind their only companion. No permanent home, only survival from one oasis to the next, and trailing them like shadows the predators. To watch this unfold would feel less like a nature documentary and more like an epic of endurance. Each creature pushed to the limits of adaptation, Fossil evidence tells us that deserts weren't barren. In Morocco, Niger, and Egypt, bones of giant fish, crocodile-like reptiles, and dinosaurs lie entombed in once dry sands. These lands shifted back and forth between lush wetlands and blistering deserts, like a world that could not decide its fate. With each shift, ecosystems broke and rebuilt, forcing species to adapt or disappear. And disappear many did. For all its adaptations, the desert was ruthless. When waterholes dried, even the strongest herbivores perished, leaving skeletons bleaching in the sun. But these deaths fed scavengers' flocks of pterosaurs descending like vultures, small predators. Gnawing bones, insects swarming over carcasses. Nothing went to waste. In deserts, survival wasn't about thriving. It was about recycling, about clinging on in any way possible. The story of prehistoric deserts isn't just about harshness, it's about resilience. If you look closely, deserts breathe life into creatures in ways no lush forest ever could. They demand toughness. They sculpt bodies and behaviors in ways unseen elsewhere. The wide feet of Oranosaurus, the sprinting legs of Deltadromus, the heat-managing sails and frills of strange herbivores, all of these adaptations were whispers of the desert's influence. And as the wind howled across those ancient sands, carrying fine grains over skeletons that would not be unearthed for millions of years, one truth became clear: the desert was not empty. It was alive, it was unforgiving, and it was beautiful in its own quiet, dangerous way. When you stand in modern deserts today, whether in the Sahara, the Gobi, or the Kalahari, you are standing in landscapes that carry echoes of those ancient struggles. Every shifting dune, every oasis, every whisper of dry wind is a reminder that even the harshest places can breathe with life. And millions of years ago, dinosaurs breathed their Chapter 7, frozen worlds. When we think of the age of dinosaurs, our minds often drift to steamy jungles, vast swamps, and humid coastal plains. We picture green abundance, where reptiles grew to unimaginable sizes under endless warmth. But the truth is stranger. Dinosaurs were not confined to tropical havens. They walked in lands of snow, hunted under auroras, and grazed where the sun might vanish for months. They did not just endure cold, they thrived in it. Imagine Earth during the Cretaceous. At the poles, forests of conifers and ginkgos grew under skies that knew months of daylight, followed by months of darkness. Winters bit hard, summers stretched endlessly, and snow blanketed the ground where herds of dinosaurs once marched. These were the frozen worlds, and they reveal a side of prehistory few imagined. In the southern reaches of what is now Australia, paleontologists have uncovered fossils of small dinosaurs that lived well within the Antarctic Circle. Among them was Leelanosaura, a tiny herbivore no bigger than a dog, with unusually large eyes. Those eyes were not for vanity, they were tools of survival, adapted to peer through the dim twilight of long winters, when the sun never rose above the horizon. For months, these little creatures lived in a world of shadows, scraping by on whatever plant matter they could find beneath the snow. Nearby lived Timimus, a slender, ostrich-like predator built for speed. But in the icy wilds, speed alone was not enough. Prey was scarce. Perhaps Timimus relied on stealth, or perhaps it followed herds during their migrations, waiting for the weak to falter in the cold. To imagine such a predator in a world of snowstorms is to rewrite the way we see dinosaurs. They were not bound by heat. They had learned the art of endurance. Further north, in what would one day become Alaska, a similar story unfolded. Fossils from the Prince Creek Formation tell us of dinosaurs that lived through polar extremes. Herds of Edmontosaurus, massive duck-billed herbivores, trudged across frozen floodplains. Did they hibernate, storing energy like bears? Or did they migrate vast distances, chasing sunlight across the ancient world? Some scientists argue that juveniles grew too fast to withstand months of fasting. They must have found food year-round. Even in the snow dot and where herbivores marched, predators followed. Evidence points to the presence of Nanooksaurus, a smaller cousin of Tyrannosaurus rex. Unlike its colossal relative in warmer lands, Nanooksaurus was leaner, possibly covered in insulating feathers, and armed with senses honed for hunting in darkness. In the frozen forests, where auroras flickered across the sky, this predator ruled not by sheer size, but by adaptability. Its name means polar bear lizard, a fitting title for a hunter shaped by winter. But what did dinosaurs eat in these icy realms? Plants were not as plentiful as in tropical zones. Instead, conifer needles, tough shrubs, and seasonal growth provided the backbone of survival. Some herbivores may have scraped bark, while others gnawed frozen roots. The frozen world's forced creativity. Unlike lush jungles where food was constant, here every meal mattered. Those who could adapt lived. Those who could not perished. Fossilized burrows give us another clue. In some polar regions, scientists have found tunnels carved by small dinosaurs. These were not the sprawling homes of mammals, but simple refuges dug into the permafrost to escape biting winds. Within these burrows, groups of dinosaurs may have huddled together, conserving heat, waiting for the storms to pass. If true, it suggests behaviors of warmth and cooperation, a side of dinosaurs rarely imagined. Snow and ice also reshaped predator-prey dynamics. Tracks frozen in ancient mud reveal herds moving close together, tightly packed for protection. Predators, in turn, had to be patient, using snowdrifts and forests as cover. Imagine a feathered Nanooksaurus crouched low, blending into a snowy thicket, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Silence was survival. And then there were the skies. Pterosaurs may have soared over icy rivers, searching for fish beneath frozen surfaces. Early birds, already feathered and warm-blooded, took to the air even in these extreme latitudes, proof that evolution had already begun favoring traits for cold endurance. These frozen worlds were testing ground shaping, not just dinosaurs, but the very blueprint of the creatures that would one day become modern birds. But frozen worlds were not constant. Earth shifted between greenhouse and icehouse phases. At times, glaciers retreated and polar lands bloomed with greenery. At others, ice crept forward, swallowing habitats. Dinosaurs living here had to face not just the ordinary struggle for survival, but the shifting rhythm of climates beyond their control. In many ways, they were climate refugees before the concept existed, yet life persisted. Leelinosaurus, big eyes, Nanooksaurus is possible. Feathers, the burrowing shelters of smaller dinosaurs, all of these speak of resilience. Dinosaurs were not locked in one mold. They were explorers of every environment, including the frozen frontiers. Perhaps the most haunting image is this: a herd of Edmontosaurus, marching through snowfall, steam rising from their nostrils as they breathe, young huddled close to adults for warmth. Overhead, the night sky glows with the northern lights, shimmering across a prehistoric wilderness. In the darkness, predators lurk. In the snow, bones lie buried, waiting to be found millions of years later. These frozen worlds remind us that dinosaurs were not just creatures of heat. They were masters of survival in extremes. They proved that life, when pushed, finds a way even in the coldest corners of Earth. And as snow falls quietly on fossil beds in Alaska and Antarctica today, it blankets not just stone, but stories. Stories of dinosaurs that once breathed in the frost, walked beneath auroras, and thrived where we least expected them. The frozen worlds were never empty. They pulsed with life. They remind us that even in silence and snow, Earth's past was anything but still. Chapter 8. Fire and ash. When most people picture the age of dinosaurs, they imagine a paradise of endless green forests and thriving animals. But Earth was never a tranquil stage. It was alive, restless, violent, and unpredictable. Beneath the soil, magma stirred. In the skies, ash clouds gathered. Fire and ash were constant companions of life, and for dinosaurs, survival often meant enduring a world that could turn lethal in an instant. Volcanoes towered over prehistoric landscapes, some as tall as mountains we know today, others stretching across continents in massive chains. When they erupted, the earth shook, skies darkened, and rivers of lava carved paths of destruction through forests. Dinosaurs living in these times did not simply witness eruptions, they were shaped by them. Entire ecosystems could vanish overnight, blanketed under smoldering ash or drowned in molten rock. Imagine a dense conifer forest in the Jurassic. Sauropods graze among the trees, pulling down branches, their calls echoing in the mist. Suddenly, the ground trembles, birds take flight. Smoke rises from a nearby mountain as a volcanic plume tears skyward, carrying ash and poisonous gases. Within hours, the world turns dark. Leaves wilt under falling debris, rivers boil with heat, and the once lush landscape is transformed into a wasteland of cinders. For the dinosaurs caught in its path, survival meant fleeing, but there was only so far they could run. Ashfall was a silent killer. Unlike the blazing heat of lava, ash crept into lungs, coated plants, and poisoned water supplies. Fossil beds in regions like China and North America reveal entire groups of dinosaurs that perished together under ash layers, frozen in time by catastrophe. Tiny feathered dinosaurs, delicate and fragile, were buried alongside giants, proof that fire and ash did not discriminate. But fire was not always born from volcanoes. In drier regions, wildfires spread like predators across the land. Fueled by dense vegetation and lightning storms, they consumed vast tracts of forest. Dinosaurs caught in the flames faced choices as brutal as any hunt: run, suffocate, or be consumed. Smoke choked the skies, forcing herds to flee toward rivers and wetlands. Tracks frozen in ancient mud tell stories of animals stampeding together, desperate to escape the inferno. Yet, destruction also bred renewal. Just as modern forests depend on fire to clear old growth and spark new life, prehistoric ecosystems were reborn from the ashes. After flames swept through, ferns natures, pioneers sprang back quickly, carpeting the land in green. Herbivores returned, followed by predators, and the cycle of life began anew. Fire was both destroyer and creator. Still, the most terrifying force was not a single eruption or firestorm, but the planet-wide volcanic events known as flood basalts. Unlike localized eruptions, these unleashed unimaginable quantities of lava, sometimes covering entire continents. The Siberian traps 250 million years ago poured out so much molten rock and gas that nearly all life on Earth perished in what scientists call the Great Dying. Though this predated the dinosaurs, it shaped the stage they would later inherit. But the dinosaurs themselves would one day face their own volcanic apocalypse. Toward the end of the Cretaceous in what is now India, the Deccan traps unleashed eruptions lasting hundreds of thousands of years. Gigantic flows of lava blanketed the land, belching carbon dioxide and sulfur into the skies. Temperatures rose and fell erratically. Acid rain scorched forests. Food chains teetered. Dinosaurs endured wave after wave of environmental chaos. Long chapter. 9. The Star Hunters. When the sun dipped below the horizon in the age of dinosaurs, the world transformed. Day belonged to the giants, the thundering herds of sauropods, the fast-running ornithopods, the tyrants that stalked with daylight precision. But night was a different kingdom altogether, and in the shadows, new rulers emerged. Under the brilliance of prehistoric night skies, with stars burning brighter than in any cityless modern world, the hunters of darkness stirred. Nocturnal life is older than humanity itself. The moon has always drawn the bold, the cautious, and the strange out from hiding. In the Mesozoic, nights were not empty stretches of silence. They were alive with rustles, wing beats, and calls that pierced the cool air. Eyes glimmered in the moonlight, claws scraped against stone, and hidden hunters waited for the perfect moment to strike. These were the star hunters, predators, and survivors who had adapted to thrive when others slept. Evidence for nocturnal. Dinosaurs has long fascinated paleontologists. By studying the size and structure of fossilized eye sockets, called sclerotic rings, scientists can estimate how much light an animal's eye could gather. Dinosaurs with large rings relative to their skull size are believed to have been adept in low-light conditions, much like modern owls or cats. Among the clearest candidates is Trudon, a small but razor-sharp predator of the late Cretaceous. With massive forward-facing eyes, it could see in dim starlight and detect even the faintest movement. Imagine it creeping silently through a forest, clearing, its gaze fixed on a nesting ground of small herbivores. For prey that thought night offered safety, Trudon was a nightmare come alive. But Trudon was not alone. Across different continents and epochs, other dinosaurs too found their calling in the dark. Small feathered raptors, perhaps no larger than turkeys, may have hunted insects, mammals, or even sleeping lizards by moonlight. Their light bodies and sharp senses gave them an advantage in the silence of night. Unlike the thunderous steps of a tyrannosaur, these hunters moved quietly, slipping between ferns and tree roots, their shadows blending with the underbrush above them. The night sky belonged to the pterosaurs. While many pterosaurs were diurnal, some species showed adaptations for twilight or nocturnal flight. Imagine their leathery wings gliding across a moonlit lagoon, skimming the water's surface. For fish, the air would have been filled with their cries, mingling with the chirps of early crickets and the croaks of amphibians. To stand in a Mesozoic night was to be enveloped in sound, a prehistoric orchestra conducted under the stars. Yet it was not only predators that used the cover of darkness. Herbivores, too, may have shifted their activity into the night. The giant sauropods that towered in daylight likely rested in the cooler hours of evening, but smaller plant eaters may have grazed by starlight, avoiding daytime heat and predators. Ankylosaurs, armored like living tanks, may have lumbered out during dusk to feed in relative safety, their heavy bodies glowing faintly in the silver light of the moon. Night also shaped behavior in ways beyond hunting and feeding. Communication may have been deeply tied to darkness. Calls carried farther in the cool night air. Display feathers and crests, dazzling in daylight, may have been less useful at night, but glowing patterns, reflective scales, or bioluminescent partners like insects could have created surreal nighttime spectacles. Imagine a small raptor calling into the dark, its crest faintly illuminated by fireflies, searching for a mate while predators prowled nearby. The stars themselves were different in those days. Without cities, pollution, or artificial lights, the Mesozoic night sky was a canvas of overwhelming brilliance. The Milky Way would have stretched in a radiant arc, guiding migration routes and perhaps influencing instinctive movements of entire herds. Prehistoric creatures, sensitive to patterns of light, may have used the stars as their compass, just as birds and sea turtles do today. But the night was never safe. For mammals, then tiny and vulnerable, night was their chance to dart from hiding places and forage. Yet, even under cover of darkness, they had to contend with dinosaurs built for shadow. Trudon's gaze, the swift lunge of a feathered hunter, the swooping dive of a pterosaur, they all kept the balance of fear alive. Fossil evidence reveals that nocturnality was not rare, but widespread. From lizards to insects, amphibians to early birds, the darkness buzzed with life. Dinosaurs were part of that web, their adaptations carving out niches unseen in daylight. And when meteorites streaked across the sky, as they often did in a world still raw and chaotic, the night must have lit up with terror and wonder alike. For a fleeting moment, the star hunters would pause, their kingdom illuminated by fire in the heavens. Night also carried its own predators beyond dinosaurs. Crocodilians lurked in rivers, their eyes glowing just above the surface, waiting for careless steps. Giant amphibians in earlier ages surfaced with silent gulps. Insects swarmed in clouds, feeding bats' ancient relatives and early avian species. It was a different battlefield, quieter, but no less deadly. The romance of imagining these star hunters lies not just in their predatory edge, but in the realization that life in the Mesozoic was truly 24 hours. Dinosaurs were not merely creatures of blazing daylight, they owned the shadows as well. To walk through a Cretaceous forest at midnight would have been to hear the crackle of dry leaves under unseen steps, the rustle of wings above, and the sudden silence that signaled a predator's gaze fixed upon you. The reign of the dinosaurs was not just carved in sunlight. It glittered under moonlight, under constellations older than humanity, in the eyes of predators that watched, waited, and thrived when most of their world slept. This was a dominion written not only in flesh and bone, but also in shadow and starlight. They were the hunters of the stars, and the night was their empire. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Nest. The sound of life often begins in the smallest places. Not in the thundering footsteps of giants, nor in the clash of predators, but in something far more fragile, an egg, buried in sand or nestled in a carefully built mound. These were the echoes of beginnings, the hushed heartbeat of an age ruled by dinosaurs. It's tempting to imagine dinosaurs only as roaring, earth-shaking beasts. Hollywood has trained us to hear them as monstrous predators or colossal herbivores crashing through forests. But if we could step quietly into their world, crouch low, and really listen, what would we hear? We'd hear the soft shuffle of mothers arranging nests, the low vibrations of calls meant to guide hatchlings, and the faint tapping of tiny beaks against eggshells as new lives pushed their way into existence. Somewhere in the late Cretaceous, the nesting grounds must have been alive with these delicate noises. Imagine hundreds of eggs spread across sandy riverbanks, each holding the promise of a new generation. The air filled not with the ferocity of adults, but with the tender rituals of reproduction, creatures who, despite their size and strength, returned to the most vulnerable of tasks, protecting their young. We know much of this because fossilized nests tell us stories. Whole clutches of eggs have been preserved, complete with the outlines of embryos frozen in time. These silent fossils speak volumes about the lives that once stirred inside them. Take, for example, the Maiasaura, whose very name means good mother lizard. In Montana, paleontologists discovered vast nesting colonies, with hundreds of fossilized nests clustered together. The evidence showed that mothers returned to the same sites year after year, laying eggs in carefully dug pits. But the real surprise was what happened after the eggs hatched. Within the nests, the bones of hatchlings showed uneven development. Some were too weak to walk right away, meaning they must have stayed in the nest, cared for by adults who brought food. Picture that for a moment. A world where giant herbivores, creatures the size of school buses, tenderly return to their nests, dropping chewed-up plants into the mouths of their helpless young. That is not the dinosaur of nightmares. That is the dinosaur's nurturing, and this wasn't just a rare case. Evidence suggests many dinosaurs invested far more in their young than reptiles do today. In some nests, fossilized eggs are arranged in neat circles, as though carefully placed. In others, you can still see the indentations of parents who may have brooded their eggs, much like modern birds do. The oviraptor, once thought to be a thief of eggs, was later found fossilized atop its own nest, arms outstretched in a protective embrace. That name, egg thief, suddenly felt unfair. Instead, oviraptor became a symbol of parental devotion. But nesting grounds weren't safe havens. They were battlefields of survival. Every egg was a prize. Predators lurked, waiting for the chance to snatch a meal before a hatchling even saw daylight. Fossils of broken shells tell stories of raids. Just as today's sea turtles must race to the ocean before seagulls swoop in, baby dinosaurs faced similar struggles. The moment they cracked free of their eggs, they had to run, stumble, and hide if they hoped to survive. Some may ask, why lay so many eggs if so many would perish? The answer lies in strategy. Dinosaurs, like many reptiles today, laid numerous eggs to balance the odds. Even if only a handful survived from each clutch, it was enough to keep the species alive. But not all relied on numbers. Some species appear to have invested heavily in protection, staying with their nests, guarding, feeding, and raising their young. In those echoes, we find a spectrum of parenting styles, not unlike what we see across the animal kingdom today. The soundscape of nesting colonies must have been extraordinary. Hundreds of hatchlings chirping and squeaking, much like baby birds, calling out for their mothers. Scientists believe many dinosaurs produced high-pitched noises as infants, easily recognized by their parents, just as modern chicks imprint on the sound of their mother's call. So too might dinosaur hatchlings have known the voices of their kind from the very beginning, and the parents, in return, likely communicated back. Low rumbles, deep vibrations traveling through the ground, guiding tiny legs back toward safety. We've seen similar behavior in elephants, who can call to their calves with sounds too deep for us to hear. It's not hard to imagine a hadrosaur doing the same, summoning its young with vibrations that rippled across the nesting grounds. The environment itself played its part. Some dinosaurs laid eggs in sandy dunes, where the sun's warmth did the incubating. Others built mounds of rotting vegetation, much like modern megapode birds, letting the heat of decomposition act as a natural incubator. Each strategy came with risks. Storms could wash nests away, predators could sniff them out, or temperatures could shift just enough to affect survival. Yet, against all odds, enough hatchlings made it through. One of the most haunting fossil finds of all time captures this struggle perfectly. Paleontologists uncovered a nest containing a group of baby protoceratops, still huddled together, preserved by a sudden sandstorm. Their tiny bones, their fragile postures, all frozen in the act of waiting for a parent who would never return. They never had the chance to grow horns, to graze, to roam the open plains. But their remains give us a window into a world where the echo of the nest was both promise and peril. And then, there is the emotional dimension. It's hard not to project ourselves onto these scenes. A mother crouched over her eggs, fending off predators. A father circling a nest, calling out to hatchlings. Families huddled together, their voices mingling in a prehistoric chorus of survival. These are not cold, mechanical animals. They are creatures engaged in the timeless story of life, one that transcends eras, continents, and species. The echoes of the nest are more than fossilized shells. They are proof that even in an age of giants, tenderness mattered. That the story of dinosaurs wasn't only about dominance, but also about devotion. Every footprint and every roar began here, in the silence of an egg, waiting to break as night falls across the nesting grounds. We might imagine the chorus fading into soft quiet. The mothers rest, the fathers stand watch, and beneath the surface of the sand, life stirs. Heartbeats quicken. Tiny claws scrape. The cycle continues. And though millions of years separate us from that moment, if we listen closely enough, we can still hear it, the faintest tapping of life, the whispers of beginnings, the echoes of the nest. Chapter 11, Ancient Neighbors. When we picture the world of the dinosaurs, it's easy to imagine them as the undisputed rulers of Earth, towering over their landscapes, unmatched in power and unrivaled in dominance. But the truth is far more fascinating. Dinosaurs, as mighty as they were, didn't live in isolation. They weren't alone on their prehistoric stage. They shared their environments with countless other creatures, giant reptiles, mammals the size of shrews, birds, amphibians, and even the earliest ancestors of the animals we know today. These neighbors often played silent but crucial roles in the ecosystems that made dinosaurs possible, and the relationships weren't always peaceful. Some were symbiotic, others competitive, and many outright hostile. The dinosaurs, for all their grandeur, were just one part of a bigger, interconnected web of life. If you think of the Mesozoic like a bustling city, dinosaurs were perhaps the skyscrapers and landmarks, but surrounding them were thousands of smaller buildings, alleys, markets, and side streets. Together, they told the real story of life on prehistoric Earth. So let's open the curtain on this hidden cast of characters, the neighbors of the dinosaurs, ancient beings that coexisted, clashed, and sometimes thrived alongside them. Picture the Triassic period, more than 230 million years ago. This is when dinosaurs first emerged, but they weren't the dominant life forms yet. In fact, they were minor players at first. Their neighbors at this time included the Rauisuchians giant, crocodile-like predators with towering legs and jaws lined with dagger teeth. These terrifying reptiles were the apex hunters before dinosaurs claimed that role. Imagine being one of the first small dinosaurs, darting through ferns and trying not to attract the attention of these reptilian overlords. For millions of years, dinosaurs had to live in the shadows, competing for food and territory. And then there were the mammal-like reptiles, creatures that looked halfway between lizards and furry mammals. Cynodonts, for example, were distant relatives of modern mammals. They weren't huge, but they were clever and adaptable. They hunted insects at night, while the dinosaurs slept. It's strange to think about, but in those early days, your ancestors' tiny, whiskered cynodonts were already carving out a place in a world ruled by giants. Fast forward to the Jurassic. By now, dinosaurs had established dominance across most of the planet. Sauropods like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus were spreading across plains, while predatory theropods grew larger and more specialized. But even here, dinosaurs weren't alone. Pterosaurs, for instance, filled the skies. These flying reptiles weren't dinosaurs, though they're often lumped in together. Their wings membranes, stretched over elongated fingers, allowed them to soar where dinosaurs could not. They were the neighbors in the skies, competing for fish, insects, and small prey. Some were as small as sparrows, others as massive as a small airplane. Imagine a sauropod lifting its long neck to strip leaves, while above, a flock of pterosaurs circled in the golden light of dawn. And beneath the surface of rivers and lakes, other neighbors thrived. Crocodiliforms, ancient relatives of crocodiles, stalked watersides, waiting for anything unlucky enough to wander too close. They shared the same habitats as dinosaurs, but played by different rules. While dinosaurs roamed the land, these ambush predators owned the watery edges, snapping up fish, turtles, and occasionally a careless young dinosaur. Even insects were important neighbors. Dragonflies with wingspans of nearly a foot buzzed over swamps. Termites and beetles worked endlessly, breaking down vegetation and recycling nutrients. Without them, the forests dinosaurs relied on might have choked under their own debris. In their small, quiet way, insects made the reign of dinosaurs possible. The Cretaceous brought an even greater diversity of neighbors. By now, flowering plants had appeared, spreading across landscapes and reshaping ecosystems. With them came pollinators, bees, and early wasps buzzing between blossoms. Dinosaurs ate the plants, but these small neighbors helped them grow in the first place. Without pollinators, many of the lush habitats dinosaurs thrived in simply wouldn't have existed. Birds, too, emerged as distinct from their dinosaur ancestors. Think of Archaeopteryx in the Jurassic, but by the Cretaceous, there were many bird species filling niches in the skies. Some swooped down to snag fish, others nested in trees, and some scavenged alongside larger predators. To the dinosaurs below, these birds were simply part of the background neighbors that could dart through the air, picking up the scraps left behind. And then there were mammals. Still small, still overshadowed, but increasingly sophisticated. They burrowed underground, hunted insects in the dark, and sometimes scavenged meat from dinosaur kills. Some, like Rhipinomymus, even grew large enough to prey on baby dinosaurs. Yes, your tiny mammalian ancestors weren't just survivors. Occasionally, they were predators, daring enough to attack the vulnerable offspring of creatures hundreds of times their size. But neighbors aren't always competitors. Sometimes they're collaborators, even unintentionally. Take dung beetles. Fossil evidence suggests that early dung beetles rolled and buried dinosaur droppings. By doing so, they recycled nutrients back into the soil, helping plants grow stronger and faster. In a way, beetles were cleaning up after dinosaurs and fertilizing the very forests those dinosaurs fed upon. Or look at marine life. While dinosaurs never swam in the open oceans, their world brushed up against it constantly. The seas were full of ammonites, plesiosaurs, and giant marine reptiles like mosasaurs. Fish thrived in coastal waters, feeding the pterosaurs above, and sustaining the ecosystems at the edges of continents. For dinosaurs living near shorelines, these creatures were neighbors too distant, but vital. Yet, not all neighbors were benign. Disease was another constant presence. Parasites lived on dinosaur skin, much as ticks and fleas live on mammals today. Fossilized bones even show signs of infections, evidence that neighbors too small to see could topple even the mightiest. Giants. Imagine a towering sauropod weakened not by a predator, but by a microscopic invader living inside its blood. The unseen neighbors may have been some of the most dangerous of all. The end of the Cretaceous shows us just how interconnected these neighbors were. When the asteroid struck, it wasn't just dinosaurs that vanished. Many of their neighbors, pterosaurs, ammonites, marine reptiles disappeared too. But some neighbors survived. Crocodiles made it. Turtles carried on. And of course, mammals, the small, often overlooked neighbors, seized the opportunity to rise from the shadows. Think of it this way. Dinosaurs may have been the celebrities of their age, but their neighbors were the supporting cast, and some of those supporting players became the stars of the next act. The mammals that once darted between dinosaur feet would eventually evolve into elephants, whales, and us. So, when we imagine a dinosaur's world, we should never see it as empty. Plains with a single giant creature lumbering across. We should hear the buzzing of insects, the croak of amphibians in nearby ponds, the splash of crocodiles, the screech of pterosaurs overhead. Dinosaurs never lived alone. They lived surrounded by ancient neighbors, each shaping the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. And maybe, just maybe, that's the bigger lesson. The reign of the dinosaurs wasn't only about dominance. It was about coexistence, an endless balancing act among countless creatures, big and small, famous and forgotten. A lesson worth remembering today as we share our own world with neighbors. We often overlook. Chapter 12. Twilight across the plains. The day is almost over. The sun hangs low in the prehistoric sky, burning like a molten coin sinking into the horizon. Its fading light washes the endless plains in gold and crimson, stretching shadows across the grasslands where dinosaurs roamed. Twilight, that brief yet profound transition, was as much a part of ancient life as dawn or midday. And in this in-between hour, the Cretaceous world seemed to pause, then slowly come alive in a different way. The great herds of herbivores begin their quiet march back to safer grounds. Sauropods, their colossal necks swinging gently like cranes above the vegetation, move in long lines toward the river valleys where they can rest in shallow water or near clusters of trees. Hadrosaurs shuffle together, their duck-billed faces turned toward the dying light, their calls soft but constant, like an evening chorus echoing across the plains. In the distance, the smaller creatures, ornithopods, early mammals, even birds skitter and dart, finding burrows or trees to tuck into before full darkness falls. But twilight was not only about retreat. For some, it was an hour of strategy. Predators knew this was a time of vulnerability. The fading light played tricks on the eyes. Herds grew restless, young ones wandered too far from their parents, and the plain's tall grasses became shadows. Within shadows, perfect cover for those who stalked. Imagine a lone Tyrannosaurus, its silhouette outlined in fading orange. It does not roar. It does not charge. It waits. Twilight is not about the chase, but about patience. One wrong step, one misplaced sound, and the herd will bolt into the night, impossible to track. The apex predator knows its moment will come, but not yet. Meanwhile, the air itself changes. A cooler breeze rolls across the landscape, carrying scents of water, plants, and musk from thousands of bodies. Dust kicked up during the day begins to settle. Insects, silent under the hot sun, now hum and rise in clouds, painting the air with tiny movements that catch the dim light. Fireflies or their prehistoric counterparts flicker in the grass, and bats, ancient but familiar, stir awake from their day's rest. The twilight plains were never silent. Herds grunted low to each other, communicating reassurance or warning. Predators' distant footsteps pressed against the soil. Frogs croaked from shrinking pools, and primitive crickets rubbed their wings to life. This soundscape of transition was as much a part of survival as the hunt or the migration. Some dinosaurs had adapted their lives around this liminal hour. The smaller, more vulnerable species, such as the hypsilophodonts, often used twilight to travel between feeding grounds. Neither full day nor full night, twilight gave them the cloak of half-light, reducing their visibility to sharp-eyed hunters. For them, this was the safest time to move. Yet even here, safety was never guaranteed. In this changing light, the plains themselves transformed. Colors dulled, but outlines sharpened. The sky stretched wide and limitless, fading from orange to violet to a deep indigo that promised stars. The flat horizons made even the smallest movement visible, whether a distant herd or a stalking shape. Twilight was beauty, but also tension, a daily reminder that survival never rested. Birds, close cousins of the dinosaurs, were among the last to settle. They perched in clusters on tall cycads or primitive conifers, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. Some let out final cries, sharp and piercing, marking their territories before sleep. Others, nocturnal by nature, stretched their wings and prepared to hunt insects under the rising moonlight dot, and then came the true stillness. The sun vanished. The plains grew dim, the only light now a fading glow at the edge of the earth. Shadows deepened, and every creature that remained awake moved with caution. To survive twilight was to respect it, neither rushing the moment nor ignoring its dangers. It was for many the most vulnerable hour of the day, but for us, looking back through time, twilight across the Cretaceous plains is more than survival. It is a glimpse into rhythm. The dinosaurs did not live in a world of constant chaos or endless battles. They lived by the patterns of nature, the rise of the sun, the fall of twilight, the quiet promise of the stars. It is here, in these fleeting, in-between moments, that their world feels closest to ours. For just as the plains of the past filled with herds finding their way home and predators watching from the shadows, so too do our own plains and savannas today. The rhythm of life continues, unchanged for millions of years. Twilight remains the same, an hour of beauty, an hour of tension, an hour that belongs not only to the day or to the night, but to the balance in between. And as darkness finally takes hold, the great plains settle into their long Cretaceous night. Chapter 13. The long Cretaceous night, the sun is gone. The sky above the ancient world has melted into a dome of deep indigo, scattered with stars far brighter than most of us see today. Without the haze of cities, without the glow of artificial light, the Cretaceous heavens were a masterpiece of clarity. The Milky Way stretched like a pale river of fire across the darkness, and every planet and star burned sharp enough to cast a faint glimmer on the earth below. But while the sky above was magnificent, The land below was alive with a different kind of energy. The day belonged to the great herds, the thunder of sauropod footsteps, the chattering calls of hadrosaurs, and the looming shadows of tyrannosaurs. The night, however, was claimed by another world entirely. The Cretaceous night was long, and it was dangerous. Once the sun sank and twilight faded, survival entered a new rhythm. For many creatures, this was the time to hide, to burrow, to vanish from sight. Yet for others, the darkness was an ally, a curtain that cloaked their movements and gave them dominance over the sleeping herds. Imagine standing at the edge of a wide plain, the tall ferns sway in the night breeze. Somewhere nearby, a stream trickles faintly, the sound carrying far in the quiet. Then slowly the noises build. Crickets or their prehistoric keen begin their ceaseless hum. Frogs croak from muddy pools. The wings of insects vibrate like paper in the air. From tree canopies above, small feathered dinosaurs shuffle and call to one another before tucking their heads beneath their wings. It is not silent. It is a chorus of small things, layering sound upon sound until the plains hum like an orchestra. Of survival. But beneath this steady music is another rhythm, the movements of hunters. Some predators thrived in the dark. Troodontids, small but highly intelligent, had unusually large eyes compared to their bodies, perfect for absorbing every fragment of starlight. To them, the darkness was not blindness, it was advantage. They moved swiftly and silently, hunting mammals, lizards, and even young dinosaurs that strayed too far from safety. Their cries cut the night, sharp and high-pitched, startling in the vast stillness. Further across the plains, packs of dromaeosaurs, the sickle-clawed raptors, moved as shadows within shadows. Their feathers caught no light, their steps muffled by soft earth and grass. Coordinated and cautious, they did not need sight alone. They hunted by sound, by smell, by the faintest twitch of grass in the breeze. To imagine them in the Cretaceous night is to feel the primal tension of eyes watching from the dark, waiting for weakness. Yet the most haunting sound was not from the small hunters. It was from the giants. A distant, rumbling call echoed across the plains, low, resonant, almost too deep to hear with the ear, more felt through the chest than heard. It was a hadrosaur herd, restless in the dark. Duck-billed dinosaurs often gathered together in the safety of numbers, and their calls at night were both reassurance and warning. They communicated constantly, letting each other know they were not alone, that the herd was intact. For them, the night was long, and only together could they endure it. But herds could not always prevent tragedy. Somewhere in the distance, a young hadrosaur strays too far. It hesitates, calling weakly, its voice high and vulnerable. The grasses shift. There's a flash of movement. The cries cut off in an instant. Then silence. The night swallows it whole. And life moves on. What makes the Cretaceous night so powerful is not only the presence of predators, but also the invisibility of it all. During the day, dangers were visible shadows of tyrannosaurs on the horizon, raptors weaving through ferns, crocodilians lurking near rivers. But at night, most attacks were unseen until they happened. The darkness was not just absence of light. It was the greatest camouflage of all. And yet, for some creatures, the night was not only a threat, but a canvas of opportunity. Early mammals, long overshadowed during the day by their reptilian cousins, found the Cretaceous night their true domain. Small, quick, and warm-blooded, they scurried under cover of darkness to forage for insects, seeds, and small prey. Their whiskers twitched, their noses probed the earth, their tiny claws dug into soil. The night gave them freedom. For millions of years they survived this way, watching, waiting, thriving under the noses of giants. When the age of dinosaurs ended, it would be these same night dwellers who rose to dominate the world. Birds, too, found their niches in the long night. Some perched and slept, their bodies tucked neatly against branches. But others, early nocturnal species, swept low over the plains, catching insects mid-air. Their wings flashed against the starlight, vanishing and reappearing like shadows with feathers. To see them in the Cretaceous night would feel strangely familiar, like watching owls or nightjars today. The night was long, but it was not endless. In the darkest hours, predators pressed their advantage, but even they needed to rest. As the sky wheeled overhead, the stars turned in slow arcs, and the chill deepened. Mist rose from rivers and lakes, coiling over the land like pale smoke. Those who survived the first half of the night huddled tighter, conserving warmth and energy. Occasionally, silence would fall. No insects, no frogs, no calls, only stillness. This was when the plains themselves seemed to hold their breath. Often, silence meant danger. A tyrannosaur moving silently through the dark could cause the entire soundscape to vanish, as if the smaller creatures instinctively knew to stop, to wait, to hope the giant would pass by. And then, slowly, the world would resume. A cricket's rasp, a frog's croak, the rustle of ferns. Life continued, cautious but unbroken. Toward the end of the night, the stars began to pale. The horizon, black for hours, took on the faintest glow of blue. Birds stirred first, their calls piercing the quiet. Herds shifted, restless with anticipation. The predators, successful or not, retreated into the shadows, conserving their strength for another day. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the plains, the long Cretaceous night surrendered its grip. What makes these nights so unforgettable in the story of dinosaurs is not only their danger, but their endurance. To survive the night was to survive uncertainty, to live another day in a world where death could come from tooth or claw or from silence. For millions of years, the cycle repeated, day for the giants, night for the shadows. And through it all, life endured. The Cretaceous night was long, but it was not empty. It was filled with sound, with movement, with the eternal rhythm of survival. It was a time of fear and a time of opportunity, a stage upon which the smallest creatures carved out their futures and the largest hunted with patience and precision. It was, in every sense, the other half of life, and as the stars wheeled across those ancient skies, the dinosaurs, giants and small alike, played their parts beneath them. Bound together by the same darkness we still know today. SS finally takes hold. The Great Plains settle into their long Cretaceous night. Chapter 13. The long Cretaceous night. The night in the Cretaceous world was not silent, nor was it ever truly still. When the sun slipped away and the final streaks of red faded into the horizon, the land transformed. Shadows lengthened into endless shapes, and the cooling air carried sounds that daylight never allowed to dominate. It was a time of whispers, of patience, of hidden predators and cautious prey. The long Cretaceous night was alive. Imagine standing on a wide floodplain, thick with ferns, cycads, and towering conifers. The heat of the day still lingers on the surface of the soil, but already the night chill begins to creep in. Above, the sky is unpolluted, vast and staggering. In its clarity, millions of stars burn brightly, casting a cold silver light across the land. There are no city lights to dull them, no airplanes to streak across the black canvas, just pure starlight, broken by the occasional glowing trail of a falling meteor. The Milky Way stretches overhead like an unbroken river of fire, a sight so raw and endless that it would leave any modern observer breathless. But down below, beneath the glowing stars, life was stirring. From the thick underbrush, the sharp chirps of crickets, ancient ancestors of those that still sing today, pierce the quiet. Their rhythms rise and fall, a steady pulse that seems to hold the night together. They are not alone. Strange nocturnal insects, some larger than a human hand, as they flutter clumsily through the air. Moths with patterned wings glide between cycads, searching for the faint smells of nectar-producing plants that bloomed under the cloak of darkness. And then comes a deeper sound, low, throaty, vibrating through the air. A frog, its body slick with moisture calls out from a shallow pool. It waits patiently for a reply, the echo of another, somewhere further down the water's edge. These voices bounce off the still water, mingling with the insects until the night becomes a choir. But this is only the surface layer of the long Cretaceous night. Deeper within it, larger animals make their presence known. From the plains, a herd of small, duck-billed dinosaurs stirs uneasily. Edmontosaurus, massive by any modern standard, yet considered middle-sized among the giants of its time, gathers in groups beneath the towering trees. Their senses are sharp now, their ears pricked for danger, their movements quieter than in the day. Nighttime is a predator's domain, and the hadrosaurs know it. They huddle close, parents pressing against their young, forming a living wall of protection. Occasionally, one raises its head to sniff the air, listening, waiting, preparing. Not far from them, in the shadows, lies the true master of the Cretaceous dark, the tyrannosaur. By day, it is an apex predator, commanding the plains with size and power. But by night, its strengths deepen. Its eyes, large and forward-facing, were finely tuned to detect the faintest of movements, the subtlest gleam of starlight, reflecting off scales or feathers. Each breath it takes is slow and deliberate, nostrils wide, tasting the air for the scent of prey. The ground vibrates faintly as it shifts its weight, though its steps are careful, each one chosen to mask the thunderous force within its muscles. The darkness is not a barrier to Tyrannosaurus, it is an ally. Meanwhile, smaller predators prowl the underbrush. Trudon, no bigger than a human but clever beyond most dinosaurs, thrives in this world of shadows. With eyes proportionally larger than almost any other predator, it sees the night in shades invisible to many. Its intelligence, paired with keen senses, makes it a ghostly figure weaving through the forest, hunting for small mammals, lizards, or even the eggs of larger creatures. To a Trudon, the night is opportunity. Every sound, every flicker of movement, every scent carried on the cool air tells a story. It listens, waits, and strikes. But the Cretaceous night is not merely about the hunt. It is also about survival, about endurance, about finding safety in the hours when vision is weakest. Tiny mammals, ancestors of creatures that would one day rule the earth, scuttle across the ground, avoiding the open plains. They cling to burrows, dart between tree roots, or climb into the safety of branches. By day, they hide, overshadowed by the giants that dominate the land. But at night, they emerge. Some nibble on insects, others gnaw seeds or roots. For them, the night is freedom. It is a temporary release from the crushing weight of a world ruled by giants. And what of the oceans? Offshore, where moonlight touches the rolling waves, another world of sound and motion thrives. Pterosaurs with wingspans larger than a small plane skim across the water's surface, their silhouettes sharp against the stars. They dive with grace, catching fish that rise toward the light of the moon. Beneath the surface, mosasaurs lurk. In the black water, gliding silently, their massive bodies cutting through the sea. Their presence is rarely seen but often felt, an invisible shadow ruling the depths. The night also brings the sky alive. Without artificial light, every celestial body burns brighter. Imagine the dinosaurs beneath those skies, their senses flooded with the brilliance of shooting stars and glowing constellations. Did they notice the difference? Did a hadrosaur glance upward, curious about the strange moving lights above? Did they feel fear, awe, or nothing at all? We may never know. But the stars bore witness to them, just as they now bear witness to us. There were moments of beauty, too, moments of quiet that pierced the night. The soft rustle of wind through the conifers, the slow drip of water down leaves, the rhythmic breathing of a herd at rest, gathered tightly for safety. These sounds, subtle and timeless, created a kind of harmony, a reminder that life was not just about conflict, but also about coexistence. Yet, the long Cretaceous night was never without danger. At any moment, silence could shatter. A distant roar could echo across the plains. A sudden crash of branches could mean that something enormous was moving through the trees. The cry of a fallen animal would ripple through the darkness, a signal to scavengers that food was near. Hybrids of calm and chaos. These nights shaped survival as much as the blazing sun did during the day, and as the night stretched on, time itself seemed suspended. The earth turned, the stars shifted, the predators hunted, the prey endured. Each heartbeat, each rustle, each cry was a part of a larger rhythm, the eternal cycle of life and death in a world long before ours. By dawn, when the first pale glow returned to the horizon, the nocturnal symphony would fade. The crickets would quiet. The frogs would slip back into their pools. The predators, exhausted from the hunt, would retreat into the shadows. And the hadrosaurs, bleary-eyed but alive, would lift their heads toward the warming sun. Another night had passed. Another chance at survival had been won. The long Cretaceous night was not empty. It was alive, filled with voices, filled with struggle, filled with wonder. And though we may never stand beneath those ancient skies, the echoes of that darkness still hum quietly in the world we know, the chirp of an insect, the rustle in tall grass, the haunting stillness of a starry night. In those sounds, the Cretaceous whispers to us still. Chapter 14, The Tides of Change. 2,000 words. The ocean has always been the great equalizer of life on Earth. Long before the age of dinosaurs, it was the cradle where life began. And during their reign, it was the sea that often dictated who thrived and who disappeared. The tides of change weren't just literal waves crashing against the shores, but also the massive shifts in climate, sea levels, and ecosystems that reshaped entire worlds. Imagine standing at the edge of a prehistoric shoreline. Instead of today's gentle horizon, you'd see vast shallow seas stretching deep inland, swallowing valleys and forests. These inland seas, like the western interior seaway that cut across North America, were teeming with life, giant marine reptiles, schools of fish unlike anything today, and delicate ecosystems that kept the planet balanced. But like all things in nature, balance is fragile. When sea levels rose, they transformed entire continents into watery kingdoms. When they fell, they left behind deserts and dying wetlands. Dinosaurs, often thought of as creatures tied strictly to the land, were deeply influenced by these tidal rhythms. Coastal plains provided rich grazing grounds for herbivores. Migratory routes often followed ancient shorelines. And predators like the towering Spinosaurus were adapted to both land and water, straddling two worlds. But tides don't only bring life, they also bring destruction. Entire herds could be wiped out by flooding events, or left stranded when rivers dried and wetlands disappeared. What makes the story of the tides so fascinating is that it mirrors our own struggles with a changing environment. Just as rising seas reshape our coasts today, the dinosaurs lived in an era when the ocean was never still, always advancing or retreating. Fossil evidence shows us ripple marks preserved in stone, shells embedded in what used to be prairies, and bones of land dwellers trapped in what were once tidal flats. These snapshots remind us that the tides are powerful storytellers, recording change in every grain of sand they move. But perhaps the most haunting part of this story is how subtle some of these changes were. A shoreline shifting a few miles might not sound catastrophic, but to an animal whose life depended on a very specific food source, it could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Imagine a nesting ground used for generations suddenly swallowed by water, or a freshwater river becoming salty as the sea crept inland. To us, it feels gradual. To them, it was life or death. The tides of change carried whispers of what was to come, the slow decline of some species, the rise of others, and ultimately, the reminder that no reign lasts forever. Dinosaurs may have ruled the land, but the seas held the power to rewrite their story, one wave at a time. The world they lived in was never static. It breathed, shifted, and evolved with the tides. And those tides would keep moving long after the dinosaurs were gone, shaping the world we now stand on today. Chapter 15. The last echo. The age of dinosaurs did not end with a roar. It ended with an echo. For over 160 million years, these creatures ruled Earth, dominating land, sea, and sky. They survived shifting continents, rising seas, volcanic winters, and evolutionary arms races. To the animals alive in the final days of the Cretaceous, life may have seemed eternal. The plains were filled with the sound of grazing herds. Predators still stalked their prey with lethal precision. The skies echoed with the cries of pterosaurs and early birds. The world had not yet given any clear warning that its time was almost up. And yet, the age of dinosaurs was moving toward its final chapter, a moment when everything would change forever. The final world of the dinosaurs. Imagine Earth 66 million years ago. North America was split by an inland sea, shimmering under the sun. On one side roamed herds of triceratops, their horns flashing as they clashed in ritual battles or defended themselves from predators. On the other side, the great tyrant lizard Tyrannosaurus rex prowled, its footsteps shaking the ground. These animals lived in a world lush with flowering plants, magnolias, and sequoias. Insects buzzed in swarms, pollinating forests that stretched endlessly. Birds, still close cousins to their dinosaur kin, darted through the canopy, their wings flashing iridescent colors. The oceans teemed with mosasaurs, giant marine reptiles with jaws capable of swallowing sharks whole. Pterosaurs, the rulers of the air, soared across skies that had been there since the Triassic. The Earth of the late Cretaceous was vibrant, alive, and dominated by creatures that seemed unshakable. But beneath this apparent stability, the world was restless. Volcanic activity in what is now India, the Deccan Traps, was already spewing ash and toxic gases into the atmosphere, slowly altering climates. Sea levels were unstable. Some ecosystems had already begun to weaken. Yet none of these slow changes could compare to what was about to happen. The day the sky fell, it happened in an instant. A rock 6 miles wide, traveling faster than a bullet, struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The Chicxulub impact was not just an explosion, it was a planet-wide event. In less than a second, energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs was released. The sky lit up brighter than 1,000 suns. Forests within thousands of miles burst into flames. Shockwaves rippled across the land, throwing entire ecosystems into chaos. Then came the tsunamis. Waves hundreds of feet tall raced across oceans, slamming into coastlines and drowning everything in their path. Animals that survived the first strike faced fire, flood, and terror. But this was only the beginning. Ash, dust, and vaporized rock billowed into the atmosphere, spreading like a death shroud across the planet. The skies darkened. Daylight faded. The sun itself disappeared behind a global veil of smoke and debris. For weeks, months, and perhaps years, Earth was cloaked in darkness. Plants withered. Photosynthesis nearly stopped. The food chain collapsed from the ground up. Herbivores starved first, their massive bodies unable to find enough sustenance. With them went the predators that depended on their survival. It was not an extinction that struck in one blow. It was a slow suffocation of life. One by one, the great dynasties of the dinosaurs fell. Triceratops vanished from the plains. Hadrosaurs, the great duck-billed herds, disappeared from the wetlands. Predators like Tyrannosaurus and Daguerreotheriopter, once kings of their ecosystems, dwindled to nothing. Even the mighty pterosaurs, who had ruled the skies for over 150 million years, were silenced forever, survivors of the darkness. And yet, not everything died. Life has always been resilient, even in the face of catastrophe. In the shadows of giants, small mammals scurried. Their small size, burrowing habits, and varied diets allowed them to cling to survival. Crocodiles, ancient and armored, outlasted the cataclysm in rivers and lakes, feeding on what scraps remained. Turtles, frogs, and lizards endured. Their hardy bodies adapted to lean times. Most remarkable of all, a branch of the dinosaur family tree did not perish. The small feathered theropods, the ancestors of modern birds, survived. Some could fly. Some were small enough to eat seeds or insects that still persisted in the darkness, and some found refuge in environments where others could not. Against impossible odds, they carried forward the legacy of their dinosaur kin. So while most of the giants vanished, dinosaurs never truly went extinct. They simply changed shape. Today, every sparrow, every eagle, every penguin is living proof that dinosaurs endure. When a bird takes flight, it is not just a creature of the modern age. It is the last echo of the Mesozoic, the world after the dinosaurs. As the age of dinosaurs ended, the world fell into silence. No more thundering herds shook the earth. More predator cries echoed in the forests. The plains were empty. The skies were quieter. For the first time in 160 million years, dinosaurs no longer dominated the planet. But life does not remain silent for long. In the absence of dinosaurs, mammals rose. Once small and insignificant, they now expanded into the empty spaces left behind. They grew larger, diversified, and took roles once filled by the giants. Some became grazers, some hunters, and others climbers and flyers. Over millions of years, their lineage gave rise to primates, and eventually, to us. And yet, the story of the dinosaurs was not erased. It was written into stone. Fossils preserved their bones, eggs, nests, and even skin impressions. Footprints left trails of their movement across ancient mud. In rare cases, whole bodies were entombed, frozen in the positions of life, death, and struggle. These records allow us to hear their echo, millions of years after their voices faded. Meaning of the last echo: the extinction of the dinosaurs was not just a biological event. It was a turning point in the history of life. It reminds us of fragility, of how even the greatest rulers can fall. Dinosaurs were not weak. They were successful, diverse, and adaptable. They ruled the earth far longer than humans have even existed. And yet, when the planet changed in ways beyond their control, they fell. That echo carries a warning for us. Dominance is temporary. Power does not guarantee survival. Just as the dinosaurs were undone by forces they could not stop, so too could humanity face its own challenges. Climate change, asteroids, disease, all reminders that Earth can change in an instant. But the echo is also a story of resilience. Dinosaurs never truly died. They live on in every bird, in every fossil we uncover, and in the imagination of every person who has ever looked at their bones and felt awe. The thunder of their footsteps may be gone, but the world remembers them, the eternal legacy today. We study dinosaurs not just as curiosities of the past, but as living lessons. They teach us about evolution, survival, and extinction. They remind us that beauty and terror often exist side by side in nature. And they stir something deeper in us, a longing to connect with a world that is both alien and familiar. The final echo of the dinosaurs is not silence. It is transformation. It is the flight of a bird at dawn, the fossilized track of a creature long gone, the story told in stone and imagination. It is the reminder that life endures, even when worlds end. When we look at the stars at night, perhaps we should remember, it was a rock from the heavens that ended their reign. But it was also that same universe that gave them life in the first place. The dinosaur story is the Earth story. And in many ways, it is ours too. The last echo of the dinosaurs has never truly faded. It lives on in rocks, in birds, and in us.